Some brutal losses in Week 12 for some teams with big-time playoff hopes, but it's one team that is now looking like they're reaching juggernaut status. How good are the Philadelphia Eagles with Saquon, Barkley? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Appreciate all the new listeners as well joining us daily here. Talking ball throughout the season, regular season, off season, playoffs, no matter what it is. Matt and I will be here with you breaking down the NFL. So hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast, and please hit subscribe, and we appreciate it. Do that right now if you can. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll earn $150 in bonus bets to get started. If you win that first $5 bet, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, let's start with the Sunday nighter. It was the Philadelphia Eagles that won handily over the Los Angeles Rams. Rams competitive early in this game, but just too much firepower from the Philadelphia Eagles offensively and defensively against the Los Angeles Rams. And now going week after week with the 9-2 Eagles, they seem to have too much firepower for just about everybody they play against. So we break down this game as well, but I kind of want to get to the answer of a question with the Eagles. Matt, how do they compare to the Detroit Lions, who are clearly our number one? We've talked about that in the NFL power rankings. Are they two? Are they better than everybody on the AFC side as well, potentially?
Yeah, they are really impressive, and they're on a run right now. They're controlling both lines of scrimmage. Barkley's unbelievable, and we will talk about the game. But yeah, I think the NFC pecking order is Detroit with Philly 1B on their own tier. Green Bay probably stands alone at 3, and then we can start talking about pretenders and contenders after that. You know what I mean? The Minnesotas and the West and the South, and I don't think Washington's, making a strong case for themselves anymore. But that's a great conversation. Are they? I would have the Eagles ahead of the Chiefs right now, without question. Ahead of the Ravens.
The 3 seed in the NFC is the Seattle Seahawks at 6-5. They're one game.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about them too. Yeah,
the Seattle Seahawks are the 3 seed in the NFC, and they're 2 weeks away from being not even a playoff team and being under 500 potentially.
All right,
if they lose 2 and somebody else wins, and
pretty volatile over there. Yeah,
right. So clearly it's Detroit, it's Philadelphia. Then you go to the north with the Packers. The Vikings are sitting here what are you doing at 9-2? We can't get you. We can't get
you. Even mention us, right? They're probably 4. But I do think if we're talking Eagles versus AFC, I'm a little worried about the Chiefs. They don't look like a team ready to three-peat, right now. I would definitely put the Eagles ahead of them. Well, it's hard to discuss the Ravens, but they've been on tough times lately. They might blow out the other Harbaugh brother tonight, and I might change my tune. But if I were power ranking today, the Eagles would be ahead of them. So I guess the conversation is Eagles versus Bills for second best team in the league, but they're probably all 3 on the same tier.
I think I might take the Eagles right now. Eagles might be number 2 right now. And seeing Saquon Barkley go crazy. Now, look, I do think it's important to recognize who the opponent is. And the Los Angeles Rams have done a really good job of revamping their defensive line, spent a whole bunch of draft picks on that side of the ball. You see Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. And, they've just got a nice group of young players and they're pretty good pass rushers, but they're still there was a lot of places to run for Saquon Barkley. The leaves a lot to be desired. And that's everyone's talking about, Braden Fisk, how did he fall into the second round? Well, it's nice when you see that motor and you see him get sacks and everything, but then you watch the game and you're just getting gouged run after run. And you're like, well, there's a reason he was not the greatest run defending interior defensive lineman in the draft. And so
short arms show up against Landon Dickerson and guys like that. I mean, right.
So you have a Rams team that I think is, just one of those middling teams that's kind of, they're going to take a step forward, they're going to take a step back. So it's not that impressive to see what the Eagles did, but that's like a 150-yard game. You talk about a 300-yard game from Saquon Barkley. He's running away from guys, making plays. He had the backwards the backwards hurdle last week. I mean, the dude's just playing ridiculous right now, and it is pretty fun to watch. And he's a nice fit for what the Eagles like to do on offense as well. And Vic Fangio getting the defense going on that side of the ball. The secondary is playing so much better. And things are really clicking right now for the Philadelphia Eagles at about week 12, which is a good point in the second half of the season to be feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah, and I think the Rams will beat bad teams and lose to good teams. Sometimes that offense looks unbelievable, but that's when they can protect Stafford, and they had major protection issues, to say the least. And I thought, they were talking about double team win rates and stuff like that. Jalen Carter got doubled like every snap. He's becoming the straw that serves the drink on a really good defense, even when his stats don't get there. He's starting to be the new Chris Jones. I mean, and that's terrifying to the rest of the league. I threw this out on Twitter too. Every team, every fan base, and I think yours does, mine does, should have a Brandon Graham. Like a guy that's going to go in the Ring of Honor and an all-time Eagles legend and little gray in his beard. His waistline looks a little softer than it used to, but like so easy to root for. Yeah, the leader.
Yeah, a heart and soul player for a football team. Can we start giving a little bit more love and respect for the gray beards, as my beard continues to get grayer every single episode that we do this, right? It's like, I don't like seeing these guys, that were my age and younger than my age are like old now. It freaks me out when I see, like people are talking about, hey, Todd Gurley's still in his 20s, and you're like, what are you? What? He's been out of the league for years. He might have turned 30 by now, but I remember I think it was earlier this year. There was like, hey, just a reminder, Todd Gurley's still like 29 years old. And it's just like, oh my God. So like the Brandon Grahams and the Cam Haywards and the old guys in the league, I wanted Tom Brady to play until he was 50.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, I hope he does play with a new team next year, because that's my generation of dude.
Campbell.
Pretty soon it's just going to be people that are my son's age that are playing NFL football. So old guys, Brandon Graham, phenomenal career. If this is the end for him, and it's important for teams to have those players on their football team. I totally agree with you there, Matt.
Especially the ones that stay with the same team start to finish like that. The Cam Haywards, lastly, I want to throw this out there with Barkley. So every Thursday night we have Merrill Hodge on the show to talk about the Steelers and their breakdowns. And I asked him last week, hey, Derrick Henry, you think he's the best back, the best ball carrier in the league? Without hesitation, Merrill goes, oh, it's Barkley times 1,000. Everyone else is,
right.
And that's apparent. He's by far, I think, the best back in the league right now. And I'm not saying he's more valuable than Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, but he might be the best offensive player in the league right now, too.
Right. And you're probably not even going to get an argument from me about that a running back should be like in the MVP conversation. I think, offensive player of the year, sure, that goes to Saquon. And it just the value is not there because you're talking about most valuable player, but he's been phenomenal and he's ridiculous and he's playing at a high level and power, speed. And I think his vision got better while he still has that elite athleticism, which you're seeing right now with Saquon Barkley. And he may be peaking. The end comes quick. And speaking of, he's certainly better right now than this version of Christian McCaffrey that we saw on Sunday and that we've seen over the last 3 weeks. And it's insane to say, but Christian McCaffrey might not be the best running back on the 49ers roster right now.
No.
And even though we haven't seen much of Jordan Mason, he comes in 16-yard run instantly. And that's the longest run the 49ers have had in 3 weeks since Christian McCaffrey came back. But then you can only give Jordan Mason one carry as your team can't find any sort of semblance of offense right now with Brandon Allen at quarterback as the Packers just roll over the San Francisco 49ers. Niners throwing out a preseason roster here with Brandon Allen starting at quarterback. No Bosa. They lost both lines of scrimmage. This game wasn't close, even though it kind of looked like it was a little bit close when it was like, 17-7 at one point at halftime. 49ers at 5-6 now. You said before we went on the air, maybe not quite circling the drain, but pretty darn close. They're in last place, but they're still only, a game behind the team that's in first place in the NFC West. But you can forget about any wildcard teams coming out of the West. And these teams just can't put together winning streaks in the West. And the 49ers are in a bad place. And they're definitely not going to have a winning streak, which they absolutely have to have if they don't have their starting quarterback or their most important player, in my opinion, on the entire football team, Nick Bosa. And you really saw the loss of Nick Bosa with his football team against the Packers. And the Packers on the other end, handling business, inferior opponent with a lot of injury problems. And they just went out there and were like, yeah, we're just going to have, you're going to touch the ball twice in the first half. How about that? Good luck winning that game.
Wow. Yeah. And I don't know if you laid it out well. And obviously you're on top of the Niners stuff. If it wasn't for Saquon, maybe we'd be talking about Josh Jacobs as the back of the week. I mean, he's been ridiculous, and the whole offense is very impressive to me. As for your Niners, I could point out a lot of problems if they had Bosa, Trent Williams, and Purdy. And I don't know about you, but as you were saying that, they might be the three guys they can afford to lose least, let alone,
I mean, if you were, we had these conversations on Locked On 49ers during the offseason because, offseason, and you start having certain conversations like, okay, let's rank the most important players to the 49ers in 2024 for their success. And a lot of people would say, oh, it's Christian McCaffrey 1. And then it's, and I'm like, no. It's Christian McCaffrey like 9. It's Nick Bosa 1. It's like Brock Purdy 2 because he's your quarterback, right? Because you don't want to have to throw Brandon Allen out there. And we saw what that ended up being. And
Trent Williams might be 3.
And Trent Williams might be 3, right? And then you got like Fred Warner, and then we can start talking about running backs, right? Because you got a lot of receivers, so it's not one of them. But Brandon Allen wasn't even the worst problem for the 49ers. They lost both lines of scrimmage. They could not stop the running game. I don't know why the Packers even trying to throw. That was the only way the Niners could get back in is if you throw some picks. And the Niners dropped a couple picks, and that would have been the only opportunity. Had a return called back. Like you would have needed all those things for the 49ers because they couldn't tackle. They couldn't block anybody. They couldn't run the ball, and they couldn't stop the run at all. So all the Packers needed to do was for Jordan Love to turn around and hand it to Josh Jacobs, and they were going to win that game.
And at 8-3, I think the Packers are really in a good spot. Like we led off the show, clearly number 3 in the NFC right now. I mean, that's a good spot to be, except you have to go over the road probably week 1.
Well, let's talk about those Vikings next, who are going to be like, we're the 5 seed and the Packers are the 6 seed right now. And at this point, those teams are 9 wins and 8 wins. So there's only one wild card playoff spot up for grabs. And it's the 7th seed in the NFC, basically. Like we know who the rest of it's going to be the winner of the South, which is right now the Atlanta Falcons, the winner of the West, which is right now the Seattle Seahawks, and one more team aside from Minnesota and Green Bay getting into the playoffs here. Let's talk about some of those teams, including the Washington Commanders, who are sliding off that mountaintop. The Texans with a brutal loss to a division rival, and so much more from Week 12 next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including history, economics, the great works of literature. Did you study these in school? Yeah, maybe. Have you studied them recently? Have you brushed up on these topics? Probably not. So time for a refresher, and you can find so much information there. And all of Hillsdale courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever, tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. It's the best place to get real money action on sports. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made a daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is you pick 2 or more. You go more than or less than on those stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And by the way, early in the week is the best place to start getting those picks in on Prize Picks, because there's offers and promotions like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. And Thanksgiving free square. Tyreek Hill only needs to receive 0.5 receiving yards for the projection to hit. And that means you only need one more stat projection to hit and win some real cash. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. We talked about the North, so let's finish up with the overtime thriller. The Chicago Bears trying to play spoiler against those Minnesota Vikings, took them to the brink. In the end, there was a rookie mistake and a bad sack taken by Caleb Williams in this game, even though he played really well. I thought you saw those first round tools, and in overtime, it was post Sam Darnold injury, the Minnesota Vikings winning 30-27 and improving to 9-2, same record as the Eagles. We're not talking about them in the same class, though, Matt.
Yeah, and I think we bring this up on Mondays a lot, that I think this is a good outcome for both teams. You know, you took a 9-2 Vikings team to overtime in basically a coin flip game, and even though you didn't run the ball well, your rookie first overall quarterback really looked good. I mean, he was a difference maker time and time again. And you got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen back involved. And clearly your game plan with your really good cover corner, Jalen Johnson, was to make anyone but Justin Jefferson beat you. And they did. It was Aaron Jones, Addison, and Hawkinson. So if you're the Vikes, you're like, if they take away our right arm, I can still win left-handed with my other three stars that aren't the best player on the planet, but they're right behind him, you know, on our pecking order. So I kind of think it's a win-win for everybody. I'm sure Bears fans would have liked to have said, we'd like to put a winning streak together and get that 7th spot as a wild card. But all in all, losing games for Chicago could absolutely pay off next year too.
Yeah, and you're not thrilled that you lose the game, but you're competitive. Right. You're watching your offense improve. This is one of those situations where, yeah, you know what? Shane Waldron might have been holding back the offense.
Might have been the problem.
Twice in a row with a different offensive coordinator and a different play caller. So
I should have let off of that. Yep, 100%.
Yeah. And you want to see Caleb Williams continue to get better, and then you see things that he can improve on too. And I think that the take that I saw a lot from Vikings fans with this game was that, man, it was pretty cool to win that game, but I don't know if it's going to be that fun playing against Caleb Williams for the next 10 years. And so that's exactly where you want to be if you're the Bears.
Absolutely. They're probably hoping, boy, I hope J.J. McCarthy's something like this Caleb Williams guy.
Yeah, and you mentioned that left hand, Addison going for 182 yards. It was like, man, making big play after big play, and that was huge for the Minnesota Vikings. And and the Vikings are a team that we put in a different category. I would put them closer to the Packers probably than you would, but not quite.
Yeah, I can.
The Eagles.
I think they're clearly 4. I think I was a little hard on them too. Like I think the Packers and Vikes might be in their own tier.
And they continue to find ways to win and win in different ways. And they're playing good offensive football, showing multiple ways to score, and playing good defensive football. And that means you're a good football team. So
yeah,
a little lull there after a really hot start for them, but they're good and they're clearly top 4 in the NFC.
They could certainly go to the West winner or South winner and win in Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah, let's stay in the NFC too, because there's separation now with which teams we think are really good and not. And were the Commanders pretenders all this time? They lost to the stinking Cowboys. The Cowboys have like a bad offensive line, a backup quarterback. They can't beat anybody, no matter who their quarterback is this year. They've looked awful. They go to Washington and beat the Commanders 34-26. I think your defense should be ashamed of itself, allowing the Dallas Cowboys to score 34 points and 24 of them in the fourth quarter.
41 total points in the fourth quarter. I mean, like, this almost became a non-serious football game at the end. I mean,
it was out of control.
Tackle McLaurin. Can't you push him out of bounds? Like, and then you can't make the extra point, and your kicker's a problem. And then, you try an onside kick, and the Cowboys take it to the house. It was like, I mean, like, let's put on the clown nose and the big shoes here at the end. So
that's exactly what it was.
It was.
I think our team's learning how to play against the Commanders. Is Jaden Daniels hitting a rookie wall? I mean, his line doesn't look terrible in this game. And obviously you mentioned how they were able to score some points, but to me, it's just, okay, Commanders, it's almost like the Bears, except for they just won a few more of those games. It's like, okay, season for you. There's more work to be done here, I think is really what I take away from this.
And we probably got ahead of our skis with them too. Like, 2 of their wins came on a Hail Mary, at the end that they won. And they beat a Giants team early in the year where they clearly were the inferior team to me, but the Giants lost their kicker like on the opening kickoff or something. So it was, they were probably an average team all along that we got ahead of ourselves saying, wow, these guys, are they the Texans from last year? I don't know about that. I think easy analysis is Daniels hit a rookie wall. Kings, I've heard of Cliff's Cliff is when Kingsbury gets this time of year and falls off the cliff. And it probably is a combination of both, but I'd have to really study their offense to say that's 100% it. Because Daniels looks more healthy now. He had a rib for a little bit there.
Yeah. Last
nugget, though, when Micah Parsons is playing, the Cowboys' defense is 1,000 times better than when he isn't, too. It's like the Nick Bosa conversation, right?
It's night and day when you add that level of defensive lineman to a football team. Yeah. And like I'm more convinced than ever as far as my football theories in my because we both geek out. You've worked putting together football teams, right? Like that was where you came up in football, in recruiting and scouting, and that's always been my thing. And I always put my scout hat on. I geek out on personnel way more than like X's and O's and those sort of things. If I was appointed football czar, if I was given a football team today, it would be defensive line. Let's trying to get quarterback any way we can, cheap, expensive, whatever. Quarterback's there. Obviously, it's the umbrella of the whole thing. But in between that, defensive line, offensive line, not sure where to go, defensive line, right? That's where I would build my football team.
When in doubt, you're sitting there in the third round, you're like, we need a safety, but I really like this D tackle. I'm gonna take a D tackle. Every year, right?
Yeah, there is a safety on the street right now on his couch that could go start for you in the NFL.
If I have the best pass rush in the league,
right?
And I'm just whipping offensive linemen snap after snap. I mean, these are conversations probably for like tomorrow and the next day. But you just mentioned your team without Bosa. The TJ Watt splits when he's off the field are insane over his entire career. All last week, I had to fight about TJ Watt or Myles Garrett because they played each other. Everyone hates Myles Garrett here. And I said, I actually think Myles Garrett is slightly better. I thought someone might burn down my house. I was afraid to walk to my car. and Parsons, like these guys are unbelievable Hall of Fame, massive difference makers. It's like taking Mahomes out of an offense.
Oh, yeah. And not only the best guys, if you're just not good on the defense,
right.
Screwed. You're completely screwed.
Every team has two, that are really good. Like the Bucks have Vita Vea, and he's not even scratching the surface of the best defensive tackle in the league. If you don't have two good ones, Giants have Lawrence and Thibodeau and Burns, and they have 2 wins. It's sick.
Yeah, they haven't figured out the quarterback thing. More on that. Daniel Jones, as we speak, I think clearing waivers. We'll get more news on that tomorrow. Another teaser for a mailbag this week in a shortened Thanksgiving week. There's not going to be a Thursday show for you. We've been asked already about Cliff, so we're going to have to dive deeper into that as well. But more to come on this episode from Week 12. The Texans, a brutal loss, and the Fins, or the Dolphins, back next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action right now with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. And the FanDuel app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Live in-game betting, not only NFL weekly lines, but tons of props. You want to start talking about the NFL draft and draft props, which coaches are going to get fired, who's going to win coach of the year, MVPs, NBA, NHL, every sport imaginable. You can find all that action at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So download the app or go to FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We got to talk about the Houston Texans. They are either the worst team or the best team in the NFL right now, Matt, because some of their wins look flimsy, and they're a good football team. And I'm watching them against the Titans, and I'm watching Nico Collins, and he's 6'4", and he's running through the defense. And I'm like, man, the next time I turn over to this game, the Texans are going to be up, by 2 scores. And they're not. In fact, it was the Titans that had a lead at halftime. And then you're lining up to kick a field goal, and you missed that too. So you can't even tie the game in regulation. Sprinkle a little safety on top of it, I think, at the end. I didn't even realize the final score was 32-27 and not 30-27. But it was the Will Levis-led Titans that beat the Texans. And if you're the Texans and you think you're going to do anything in January, you got to be able to win games like this, right?
Oh, man. I mean, a very strange divisional game, to say the least. I mean, 8 sacks by the Texans defense and a defensive score. Like, trust me, because I was playing against them in my fantasy league. I'm like, oh, my gosh. But then they let up 32 points. I'm like, one way the fantasy defense is going backwards, and then they score, and then another sack, and Tony Pollard's running on them. But the defense, to me, doesn't worry me with Houston. To me, the Ravens and the Texans, penalties are such an issue for these teams. And we didn't even talk about this with your Niners, but you know better than anybody, special teams. Some of these teams with like penalties and special teams are really hurting themselves when you ask yourself, why are the Texans better than they are? One of the most heavily penalized team in the league. You mentioned Nico Collins. They threw a bubble to him right off the bat. He looks like a thoroughbred running through the defense. Bring it back for illegal formation or whatever it was. So, like, come on. And then I look at Tennessee with the combination of Sweat, who I didn't think was a good pick at the time, but has had a really good rookie year, and Simmons against that interior O-line. Those type of teams are going to give the Texans massive problems.
Yeah, you make them one-dimensional immediately, and that's not great for the Houston Texans. Yeah, you mentioned the margins. I mean, good teams, and those are well-coached teams, I think. I think D'Amico Ryan's a phenomenal head coach. He's early in his career, but someone like Harbaugh wins games in the margins and on special teams. And
honestly, the Steelers are the best team in the league at it, and it's by 1,000, way in the top right corner. I post it every week. Yeah. Why are the Steelers winning games? Well, that's the kind of stuff and turnovers. Yeah. Turnovers, penalties, special teams.
Penalties. Yep, absolutely. And we saw the Niners were terrible at that, aside from being terrible on the field as well. And that's how you get blown out. So the Texans still have time to figure this out because they're going to be in the playoffs, but they're going to be one and done if they can't get some of these things.
100%. And they need to draft a guard in the first round. You know what I mean? Like, go get a big, brutal run behind.
Well, they tried that, and that is
what Green was supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you hit on it, that's good. If you look up plexiglass principle in the dictionary, are the Texans? Is there?
They seem like the poster boy.
Yeah, at least this year they are. Can we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs real quick? With a 10-1 record, speaking of some flimsy wins, the Carolina Panthers took the Chiefs to the brink here, but in classic Chiefs fashion, they find a way and they hang on and they win this football game 30-27. And a real quick note before you say that their record is better than they're playing, because I think that's where you're going to go with this for the Kansas City Chiefs. After improving to 10-1 this season, it's Andy Reid's 10th consecutive season with 10 or more wins. And it's just phenomenal what Andy Reid is doing right now. And obviously that goes well beyond Patrick Mahomes' career too. So like he was doing this with Alex Smith, and obviously he won a lot of games in his previous stint as head coach as well. And so, but the Super Bowls didn't come until Patrick Mahomes. But I mean, 10 straight years of 10 wins, even when you're a really good team, you don't have that lull, that really down year, bad luck, injuries. And they've come through all of those types of things and still won a lot of games. So it may not be pretty. They may not be beating the crap out of teams that they should be, like the Panthers. But it's still pretty phenomenal what they're doing right now.
Perfect example of everyone should be happy with the result. You moved to 10-1. I want to talk about Chiefs warts, but one of the absolute biggest storylines of the entire weekend is Bryce Young was good. Not like, oh, he's better than garbage. He was really good. He played a very good football game against a good defense, decisive, big boy throws, not manufactured junk. Maybe Canales is a good coach, and just struggled early with all the issues they had. They've been really competitive now, 3 games since Young's been back against 2-time Super Bowl champs. But I look at the Chiefs and think the secondary's kind of missing the Jadarius Sneed type dude. If it's not Chris Jones, who's the other number 2 pass rusher that we always talk about? I don't see a lot of explosiveness on offense. Xavier Worthy's not quite ready without Pacheco, who I don't think's great anyways. The running game is not explosive, and the tackles aren't great.
They could have used maybe like a Travis Etienne or something at the trade deadline, like that type of player, maybe for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I kept thinking they should have called about Kamara.
I mean, Kareem Hunt is, having a nice revival there. He was 88 yards on 18 carries in this game, but they keep winning games. So I'm not feeling bad for the Kansas City Chiefs here at 10-1, but you nailed it. Bryce Young, I think made the best throw I've seen from his career on a play where he's got heat. He's got pressure right in his face. He stood in there. He made a throw with anticipation before the receiver broke on his out, put it in a perfect spot. I mean, that's like big time quarterback play stuff. So there might be something there with young Bryce Young. So great sign for him.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting the cart before the horse, but you finish the season in a somewhat similar manner. You're my starter next year, and you'll probably have you might give you one more year, but in a weak quarterback draft, I'm not reaching for Milroe or whoever. I'm just going to roll with this guy and try to build a defense,
Guess who was on my bench with 144 receiving yards and a touchdown? It was Jalen Waddle. I won't even let you guess. I've been so frustrated with my fantasy team with Jalen Waddle, and when he's in my lineup, he's terrible, and when he's out of he's
been terrible until today.
He's in and out of the lineup. He's been on my bench for a long time. Could have used those bench points. But the Dolphins showing signs of life and putting up a big number, 34 points to the New England Patriots 15. All of those 15 points came in garbage time late for the New England Patriots. I mean, this was a thrashing by the Miami Dolphins, and 4 more touchdown passes for Tua, 300 yards passing there, and getting the offense going a little bit here against an inferior opponent were the Miami Dolphins, and it was a huge sign for them. Don't look now, 5-6 now for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, they're probably rooting against the Chargers and Denver and those type of teams. They might be able to get hot here. Well, they already are hot. Can they sneak into that 7 spot? I think that's possible. I thought that they had dug themselves too big a hole, but I might be wrong about that. Tua's playing really well. It's great they got Waddle involved. And my buddy that I do the Steelers show with always makes fun of me because my deepest sleeper in all fantasy was Jonnu Smith. I own him like in every dynasty league. You could give up a 4th round pick 3 years from now and get Jonnu Smith, but he's really helping this offense, and the defense has been great for the Dolphins lately. So I'm on board. I think they're one of the best 12 teams out there. That doesn't mean they can be one of the 14 that get in the playoffs, though.
And we're seeing some of the Mike McDaniel magic too. Like there was that goal line or a red zone pass to Achane, which was like, Tua has 4 touchdowns, but one of them was like a super well-designed little screen. It was like an inside screen in the red zone. That was a really fun play and a fun wrinkle for them. And so the fun is back with that Dolphins offense, and they're making big plays. And so that's exactly what you want to see with the Dolphins right now. Is it too little, too late? We'll find out.
BP, what do you think about this? I mean, we got a Monday nighter to recap.
Yeah.
You want to hit some of these other games that, the Bucks, Giants, things like that tomorrow? Just throw a nugget out here and there, maybe Daniel Jones news, because some of these games aren't very consequential, and I know we're up against it. I
don't think we need to hit on every single game here. I mean, the Lions blew out the Colts. It was 24. I think that's an expected outcome. And it doesn't really even say anything negative about the Colts.
Richardson looks okay
in the end, and they're going to be a spoiler team in the AFC. The Bucks blew out the Giants. I think the big story there is that guess what? You weren't better without Daniel Jones, so it clearly wasn't just the quarterback there. There's much more going on, and Daniel Jones clearing waivers as we speak. We'll have that on tomorrow's show with what happens with Daniel Jones and what team he chooses potentially in free agency, according to Ian Rappaport. Might be down to the 49ers, Ravens, and Raiders. And the Raiders apparently might be willing to just let him jump right in and be the starter right now, today. So you want to be on a good team? Do you want to be on a playoff team? Do you want to be on a bad team with the opportunity to play? We'll cover that tomorrow.
Real quick on the Bucks, though, really easy remaining schedule. And maybe they're like the Dolphins where they can get back in this thing.
The Broncos defeat the Raiders. I think that was an expected outcome. The Raiders are a bad football team. We can talk more about what we think about the Broncos tomorrow. And I think really the last one that we should spend some time on maybe tomorrow is who's good in the NFC West. The Seahawks now are on top, and they beat the Cardinals 16-6. So maybe that's one of the teasers as well for tomorrow's episode.
Absolutely. And I think the Seahawks defense is a really good story, especially with their head coach. They're healthier now. Leonard Williams was awesome in this game. Witherspoon was awesome in this game. you knew they had firepower, but now they're starting to reflect their head coach on defense.
All right. All that and more coming up on tomorrow's edition of Peacock and Williamson, a shortened week this week. So start getting your mailbag questions in early. At BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. And Matt and I back tomorrow to talk about a whole lot more, including the Heart Bowl. Right here, Peacock and Williamson.